amazing salsa music while everyone was waiting, and it was the best intro to a webinar that I have experienced. It really like pumped you up and got you ready to party. It was great.
That is a tremendous idea. I will need to ask some of our communications colleagues how to do that so that we pipe in some great the metaphoric walk up music, right?
Yes,
As you
exactly.
walk up to the plate as you get ready to play. Oh, I love that thinking. Good.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah,
I'll
it
have to
was
look into
fun.
that.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Thomas. Good.
Great. Well, it's 10:33, so I think we should start. We have a small but mighty group here, and I think it's going to just be a great conversation. We have some really great guests here to share their wisdom. Um, so just to bring everyone onto the same page, welcome to our MIVPAC meeting, the Minnesota Injury and Violence Prevention Action Coalition. This is a space for connection, collaboration, support, and camaraderie around injury and violence prevention in Minnesota. So as a quick review, we have met a couple times, or more than a couple. We met in November to give us an overview of our state plan, which has identified a shared risk and protective factor framework that we encourage folks to look to help guide injury and violence prevention work across the state. We've identified 5 shared risk and protective factors, and we're diving into each one each month to help us all to learn about the factor and how we might be able to address it through our work. So these factors are not health literacy, health equity, similar health equity that we looked into in December. We then moved on to look at community cohesion or community connectedness in January. Today, we're going to look into economic justice. And then in the next 2 months, we'll look at built environment and social emotional learning. And throughout these conversations, MIVPAC encourages all of us to think about some questions. How can each of us address this topic? Who do we need to work with, and who is not at the metaphorical table? What are the 2 most important things that we can do right now and that we have the capacity for? And then what are those 2 next things that we'd like to do, but we might need more or different resources? And what are those resources? So we'll hear from our panelists, and then we'll have some time for question and answer with them. And then we'll hopefully have some time to dive into some of those questions together as a statewide coalition, and try to see what we can think about to move economic justice forward in our state. So we have 2 fantastic guests today. Michael Gore is the president and chief executive officer of Catholic Charities, where he leads a team of 500 staff who assist more than 20,000 people annually, creating needed supports and opportunities for them to thrive. Before Catholic Charities, he was with Big Brothers Big Sisters, Generation Next, as well as the Minneapolis, Boston, and Memphis public school systems. And also we have Tara Mayfield, who is the Senior Vice President of Programs at Emerge Community Development. Emerge is a workforce and community development nonprofit with 3 social enterprise businesses that supports thousands of people in building careers and engaging with our community along pathways to brighter futures. So I'm excited to have them both here. Both of you can feel free to correct anything that I just stated about you or add anything else that you think we should know. Usually the way this works, we have about 4 questions that I will ask. We generally go from one speaker to the next speaker, but Tara and Michael can feel free to engage with each other as you see fit, and also engage with the audience however you'd like as well. And as I said, we'll have Q&A afterwards, and then I'll lead us in a discussion. So we can dive in with the first question, which is very general, but it really starts to frame the conversation. How have you seen or how do you see economic justice as an injury and violence prevention tool? We didn't pick who was going to go first before this, so I'll let one of you dive in.
Sure, I can start.
Great,
Good
Tara.
morning, everyone. So I mean, there's a significant correlation between poverty and crime. And some people living in poverty commit crimes because they need to earn income, right? And for instance, some people, if you can't find a well-paying job, well-paying legal employment, you may resort to illegal activity to make ends meet. Um, and also, when it comes to the reentry population or returning citizens returning from incarceration, having a job has been shown to reduce recidivism. Individuals are less likely to commit crimes when they have stable full-time employment. So, really, economic justice is a vital determinant in violence prevention. Financial stability allows people from any walk of life, really, the opportunity to invest in themselves, their community, and their workplaces. So the goal is really to create opportunities for people to thrive and where there is equality in income.
Well, let me just piggyback off Tara's comments and sort of talk about our space, and as a warm-up question, that is a kind of the broad, and I can go many different ways, but let me just sort of focus on one specific area, and then we can get it into violence preventions, other areas that we are engaged in. Housing for us is a social determinant of health, but it's not just health, but it's also housing impacts education achievement, workforce growth, community well-being. So to us, those of us who are involved in this space, that it is all about equity and justice in terms of housing. Without having housing, you can never get into economic justice, or just build upon Tara's comments in terms of other injustice that's taking place. So you talked earlier about how many folks that we serve in Catholic Charities every year. It's both a degree of sadness. We talk about that many folks that we're serving as an agency, but we're also obviously proud that we are able to provide certain level of services as well. So I think it's a behoove of us as a community, as we get into sort of social justice or economic justice, how do we go about making sure intentionally the folks are able to have houses or homes that they can stay and able to grow and connect with the community in a very meaningful way, being part of that community. Absent that, I think that it leads to all sorts of other inequities and trauma that community are experiencing that we get to see firsthand. Just on a side note, in terms of sort of actually putting a price tag on homelessness. So state has a definition of homelessness, and state defines homeless as a chronic homelessness, right? Someone has to be homeless for a year before other benefits that kicks in. Typically, in terms of cost wise, without level of intervention, if folks are on the community without any additional support, on average, one person costs the community or taxpayer around $40,000 per year, right? So there's a very specific financial impact. And if you extrapolate that into sort of average daily number of folks who are homeless in Minnesota, which is around 9 to 10,000 folks, that is sort of estimate that people talk about, you're talking about, 30 to 40 million dollars any given point per year per person that costing us in terms of greater community, right? So I think there is a very specific economic cost, and way to sort of overcome that is work all of us are engaged in a very different way to provide services for those community members who are looking for help, who are looking for assistance. And when you intervene, obviously costs will be far different, less than $40,000 that costs us in a community. So yeah, there are sort of definite economic costs, but obviously there's a broader issues of social justice or economic justice when it involves in housing. There's so many folks that are unsheltered, unhoused in our community that we see every day. And for us also, the work that we are really spearheading, even though it may sound counterintuitive, even though that we serve all these folks in our shelter and our housing, we do a lot of work now in terms of 2022 and 2023 in prevention work, where we are intervening prior to folks becoming homeless, where if they have a apartment or a house or some form of a house or home, that we want to make sure that they are able to stay in their current living situation. What we're trying to do is preventing that from happening where individuals are seeking shelter, because data shows us once you get into shelter, then you are into sort of very different pipeline, very difficult to get out of shelter pipeline into housing, right? So we're doing a lot more prevention work as a Catholic charity, as an organization. May sound oxymoronic, where organization was built to house unsheltered people, but we think that is a wrong model. Yeah, there are people still need help from us. We obviously are welcoming those folks every day, but we are also doing a lot of work on prevention model and connecting with a lot of different providers, community members, and organizations while we create sort of diversion model away from needing shelter.
That's really interesting, and I will have lots of follow-up questions with that. Um, since we are the injury and violence prevention section, so we love hearing about other folks, thinking about that before the issue arises. So
Mhm.
that's really interesting. Thank you. Um, you've mentioned a couple of the challenges, but I want to dive a little deeper into what are the challenges to focusing on economic justice, and what are some ways to overcome those challenges. And I guess with this, I'm thinking about the idea of, you know, the challenge to focus on economic justice. So it clearly has some dollar signs that are attached to it, which I would imagine, might be some of the challenge, but also maybe some of the stigma that is involved that has to be overcome, and some of those other social forces. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I think when we talk about economic justice, like we cannot not talk about racial discrimination. Um, and Minnesota employers, from our lens, workforce lens, Minnesota employers, they really play an important role in generating the income disparities that we see in the labor market. People of color and women make proportionately less than their white counterparts. So this plays a role. Again, when I talked about earlier, if people feel like they're not earning enough from legal income, then you may go and commit a crime to earn some income to feed your family. So, um, but it's difficult to both prove inequity, inequality, being the way they're being treated on the job, and then enforce these laws. So like a lot of discrimination continues to persist in the labor market. But I think that, for organizations also, oftentimes we need to look at ourselves and look at our hiring practices, and are there inequalities within our own organizations? Are there significant wage gaps within our own organizations? Really look at that and admit it, and see what the problem is, and really try to make an impact and change, starting with our own organizations. But if you don't recognize and admit that there's a problem, then you'll never be able to resolve it.
Yeah, I mean, those are great points, and sort of kind of, and I will localize the comment just on Catholic charities through my lens in terms of work that we're doing. Um, for us, we're working on a couple of things. One sort of is a sort of policy arena, and then one that specifically deal with our community members, both who are unsheltered as well as volunteers, right? So we are sort of experimenting a different way of looking at this and shifting the paradigm in Catholic Charities. In terms of for us at Catholic Charities, part of our uh, um, existence, our objective and goals is really dealing with issues of Catholic social teaching. Now, I'm not here to talk to you about Catholic religion. I'm not even Catholic, right? But there's a fundamental belief that we have as an organization. There's a guiding principle that speaks of collective benefit. We have, as an organization, we have an obligation, both a spiritually otherwise obligation, to really make sure that whatever we're doing makes sense for the common good. So that means for us advocating on behalf of those of us are not able to advocate, or those of us who are invisible to decision makers, or be it elected officials or folks in our community, right? Often I think the community members that we're served who are unsheltered tend to have no voice whatsoever in terms of the plight of their community, the voices they want to exercise, what benefits they're looking for, what help they're looking for. They're voiceless, yet you're talking thousands of people who are in this particular bucket. So we tend to speak on their behalf. So we as an organization made a conscious decision, conscious investment. So one of our key aspect of our work is a public policy advocacy for bettering life of our unsheltered community members, where that given the circumstances that they get to keep maximum amount of dollars in their pockets and get the max and also provide receiving appropriate level of services, so they can rely less on organization like ours, or be it other public organizations. So there's larger bucket of work that we're doing as an organization, and we have a litany of the list of policies that we're advocating for on behalf of a greater homeless community. So that's one part of our bucket. Second part of it is, I think, also is changing the paradigm within our own organization. And I'm one, I think that one of the things that as a nonprofit we don't do enough is sort of looking at being more reflective and looking inwards of what we're doing and how we are changing, or being those agencies that are sort of breaking the mold. And one of the things that we're looking at internally is, how do we begin to interact with our homeless community members who are coming into our agency, right? We've got 20,000 people coming in, and how are we interacting with them in a way that provides dignity and respect to those community members who are coming into our entity? That which includes opportunity for our clients to have a voice in terms of how we designed our services. What are they looking from? What are they looking for from Catholic Charities when they come into our shelters or into our what we call supportive housing? So creating a table where they have a voice telling us how we can improve our services, but more importantly, what services matter. To that end, one of the things, outcome that we're finding out, which sort of changing our assumption, is a lot of our community members who are coming into our services, their desire is to contribute back to the community. One assumes just because you're homeless, you have no desire to contributing back to the community. Is further from the truth. Like all of us want to be connected and want to be valued. Likewise for our unsheltered community members. So they want to engage in a very productive settings where they can contribute back to the community rather than they're the ones always receiving charity, right, from Catholic Charities. They want to make sure they have a voice and opportunity to then give back. So we're creating sort of different pockets of opportunity for them to do that, where that they have an opportunity to a re-engage in re-employment opportunity, opportunity for them to be part of our workforce, opportunity for them to pick up trash in our community for certain for services, or for them to be engaged in an employment opportunity as well. So there's sort of, we're shifting the paradigm and how we look at our clients or residents coming into our agency. One more change that we're making is how they're connecting with our volunteers. So we get a lot of volunteers, 3,000 plus volunteers, right? Traditionally, we have done it in volunteer services in two ways. One is you get to come in and serve food, right? We have 17 different sites, so you can volunteer any place in metropolitan area. What do people want to do most often? Well, I want to serve food to poor people. God bless them, right? We say thank you for coming in, doing those services. But it is a very sort of just check off list. So they can, folks do that because it makes them feel good, or say, I did it for this month. And more importantly, there's really a barrier between themselves and the community they're serving, right? If you look at any food service shelter, they're the one dishing out food to homeless community, and between them are table. There's a distance, right? And there's also power dynamic. I'm giving you food, you're receiving food from me. Now, don't get me wrong. I think we value that. We value volunteerism, but we think that's a very superficial. So we're engaged in a very different way of engaging volunteerism. So what we call that is a sort of tier one. So now we are saying to our volunteers, you got to do a little bit more deeper engagement, what we call tier two, which is opportunity for our volunteers to engage, to develop a relationship on a one-to-one level or in a group setting, having conversation with unsheltered folks. Don't be afraid. Yes, they might look different. Yes, they might smell different, but they're still human beings with all the dignity and respect. And we want them to engage them with one-on-one level, having conversation, creating opportunity for them to do that. So that's tier two. And then we're going to go one more, which is a tier three, which is about setting up relationship with sort of a mentor mentee. And I realize term mentor mentee also has a power relationship, but I can't come up with any other name so far. But it's about having individuals connecting together and providing a very deepening relationship. Because often, and I think you have said it, you have stated in your study as well, our community members who are homeless don't have a sense of connection to the community. You got to create that sense of belonging, the tribe. Where do you belong? And connecting, anchoring the space. So we're trying to develop that in a way helps our volunteers to be much more dynamic engagement, but more also our homeless community or unsheltered community members also get to engage on a group and individual level with the general population. So they begin to see and develop skills, interpersonal skills, and also, and once again, your study talked about this, developing social capital, right? You got to do that. The way to do it is interacting. So we are beginning to create that space and engaging with our volunteers. And more importantly, I find that the biggest challenge is not the volunteers or the homeless community, is our staff. Internally within our organization, our DNA is formed in a way that we think there's only a certain way people want to volunteer. So the biggest hurdle is trying to change the mind and hearts of our own employees, how they see this whole thing working out, or seeing how they see our unsheltered community members very differently. So that is sort of ongoing work phenomenon that we're engaged in, which is sort of fascinating study as I see it from the distance. It is an interesting sort of paradigm shift we're going through, and I hope to report out something positive in the future. But this is a shift that we're making as a provider of housing and shelter, and we're saying we should prevent them from coming into our shelter. So it's just sort of a disconnect for our brain. We're trying to figure out what the hell is he talking about? What do you mean you don't want them to come into our shelter? It's going to take my job away. What do you mean? So we're going through this whole transformation conversation within our own staff. And let me be quiet. I'm going on and on. So.
That's it's fascinating. You said so much, so many beautiful things in what you spoke about with connection and really humanizing this situation that I think is amazing. And I have heard that in the brief conversation that I had with Tara too about really connecting with people as humans. Despite some challenges that they may have gone through or are going through currently. So I think, wow, it's really quite amazing. And to shift an organization in prevention, we often say, if we can get ourselves to a place where we don't have a job, we've done our job. So it is a hard thing to wrap your head around, but thank you for sharing all of that. Wow. So I'll move us on to our third question, which is, there are many representatives of different organizations and agencies on this call, and who may be listening to the recorded version of this, but um, what can organizations do to increase economic justice and decrease injustice? And Tara, you mentioned a few things there about looking internally, and so did you, Michael. But really thinking beyond individual activities or changes. But what types of things can we do on the organizational level?
Think too, beyond, what I had mentioned previously about looking at your own organization, your hiring practices, putting policies in place. Um, Also too, here at Emerge, we are constantly looking for employers to form key partnerships with so that when they are hiring the people that we serve, that they're not just hiring them at a minimum wage job, but they're really hiring them at a wage that's really going to make a difference for them and their family. We're working with one company that they're committed to hiring returning citizens after we give them some training at entry-level positions where they can earn um, at an entry-level position nearly $70,000 a year. So that is very impactful, and that again, that'll change a life for them and their entire family and their community. Someone coming out of incarceration. We had a participant who came out of incarceration, entered our program, and within a year, he was earning $42 an hour. He's not going to return to incarceration. So we really want to, about forming these key partnerships and really talking about the impact that they can make, that we can make as we partner together to make a difference for our community and the lives around us. So.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. As Tara said, key thing is partnership, and I think, depending on, where I go, whomever, whatever organization I speak, I've sort of a different messaging, but end of the day, either be it a public or nonprofit or for profit, I always talk about interconnectedness and partnership in this space. For me, in terms of space that I occupy, in terms of which is unsheltered homeless issue, that one of the things that I always talk about is comprehensive sort of response system that is lacking in our community. We tend to have a specific organization does this little thing, but there's no coordinated efforts creating a comprehensive, responsive way. And that once again goes to comment earlier about Tara made, which is partnership and creating that partnership within our own organization or within other organizations and realizing that we can't do it all by ourselves, and there's a value and collective ownership in terms of this particular space, and especially space that we are occupying. Our respective agency, it requires extensive partnership in terms of other nonprofits as well as for-profits organizations. So I had opportunity in St. Paul to meet with the business leaders in our community, and they talk about issues of unsheltered of folks and challenges that businesses are faced with or their employees are faced with encountering unsheltered guests, and how should they react, and they're afraid and all sorts of other sort of emotions come up. And the way I talk to them about is volunteer in our organization. So you are familiar with our community members. It is sort of demystifying this sort of space in a way that creates opportunity. So that way, there's a decrease in sort of how people view others, this sort of sense of fear that you right away people encounter in terms of homeless community. And way to sort of counter that, and as a leader of organization for profit or folks, is volunteer engage with our community in a meaningful way. So your employees see what you're doing as a CEO, as a leader, but more importantly, other folks as well come into our organization, be able to engage. And that way, when you see John in our shelter, and when you see John on the street, you can say, "Hey, John, how are you? Are you having a good day? Good to see you." They want to be recognized. They want to be say, "Hey," someone says hello to. You know, being walking away or going opposite side of the street and ignoring them, it sends a message. What, it's a human reaction. So to get at the issues of justice and interaction, I think is all about, to me, is engagement. You have a civic and moral responsibility, engage. So we talk to businesses and other folks who are always talking to us about, what are you going to do about this homeless problem? Well, what are you going to do about it? It's not me. What are we going to do about this collective benefit, collective challenges? And there are ways to address this sorts of issues. So it's about sort of, was mentioned earlier, about creating partnership, share ownership, and, and engaging, and also demystifying and, and approaching this issue head on. Sometimes to say, well, if you want this to happen, then volunteer or engage this way or support this way.
Sure, Mark. I'll let you jump ahead in the schedule. We'll let a question come through.
Oh, sorry. No, no. Okay,
No, it's
I can
okay.
hold on.
No, go for it.
Well, so two that have been just built. So one for Tara, and then one for Michael. Um, uh, Hiring at the state is its own mystery sometimes. So my vision, as I'm listening to you, is I want it used to be when I first started that people would send me their resumes, right? And I could set up interviews, but now there's a system that they have to go through before I ever see them. It seems like there's less and less that I can do. But what I want then is for state agencies to have for our HR system to have a relationship with Emerge so that so the other supervisors on the call and other directors and managers who are going to be listening to this, so that we have a chance to even hire exactly what I mean, we have wrestled with trying to recruit because knowing the data, exactly as you say, that if we have meaningful, well-paying work, we're going to help break that cycle. And so absolutely want to do it. And the other, and it probably does have, I'd like to think that in state government that we don't have two or three sets of wage scales, and that if Catherine and I are both applying for the same position, they look at and say, "Oh well, she's a woman, so we're going to offer her less." But you know what? Maybe there is something. I mean, it doesn't matter what I'd like to believe that that's not, but it probably
Yeah,
is.
you'd really be surprised because usually, oftentimes, when employers have a wage scale, you have a scale. So you have a low, a medium, and a high. So that low is a range, that medium is a range, and that high is also a range. So what some studies have shown is that oftentimes people of color and women, if they're in that low scale, they're at the
Gotcha.
lower end of that scale, whereas
Gotcha.
their white counterpart with the same
Yeah.
experience and knowledge will be at the higher end of that low scale. So
Oh,
studies have found this. So I think it's, and then oftentimes too, when you're a larger organization and you have HR and policies and it goes through a lot of channels, it's really, really hard because, like you said, you may just get it at, at whatever stage, at the end stage, and you didn't have much input into it. You have this criteria to select from. But I think, just working with your HR team and helping them when they are developing policies, weigh in. Usually when our HR team develops a policy within our organization, they ask for feedback at every level, whether it's leadership, our direct service staff, we ask for everyone, even our participants at times. We go through that entire process of asking for their feedback before we finalize a process. So, but yeah, absolutely. I would love to connect with you. And if you have recruiting needs, we have people. There's plenty of employers that are out there that are struggling to find people. And we have people, and we really want to work with organizations and companies so that we can get you connected to some folks, good folks that are willing to work and work hard.
incredible. Awesome. And then the idea that I had was listening to Michael interact, Catherine, I was thinking about, so our work, what if our work team, and I can't compel someone to volunteer, but what if our whole work group said, we showed up, we arranged to ask Michael, where can our team come to volunteer, so that our 60 people or so show up and start. So we're starting to take that action to develop relationship, to start to know, and get a chance to help start changing our DNA. I was just thinking as I was listening to the story, I thought, oh, well, we have a work team of coming up on 60 people or so. And so maybe we can't all come to the same place at the same time, but maybe there are places where, so I was just starting to brainstorm that idea. So now I better mute myself and obey the instructions about when we're supposed to ask questions. Sorry about that.
It's all
No,
good,
good
Mark.
questions. Good questions. It was worth the schedule adjustment. No, and we can continue with questions as they come, because now we're really on to this next session. Mark, you took us there perfectly. Is the final question of what advice can you give an organization just starting to look at including or having this, focus on economic justice? Um, what can we do, both, little and small, little and big, ideas for how we can start to put this more in our central focus.
Yeah, and I think Michael all along talked about, really what he's talking about is this human-centered approach, really. And you really try to put yourself um in try to place yourself and experience what the people you are serving are really experiencing in order to serve the problem that they are encountering. So he's talked a lot about that. So I think that's the piece of advice you could always use. Look at it a lens from this participant, or this client, or this person that we serve as a real person, and really take into account their feedback. Like I had mentioned, oftentimes we're asking the participant how things should go here at Emerge. We're asking the staff, and I know many of our staff are former participants from at every level, from our HR to our leadership, are former participants. The leader of our reentry program, our manager, is a former incarcerated individual who served nearly 15 years in prison. He's managing our program. And just the rapport that he has with the folks that we serve is something that is just so notable. We gain the attention of the Department of Corrections, and they're looking into how they can make policy changes because of the things that he experienced while he was on the inside, and what his lens from the outside now and serving the participants who are on the inside. So they're calling him and asking him, how can we make changes here so that these folks don't return to incarceration? So that's really impactful. Really, if you're not experienced, from that direct experience, that's okay. Look at it from a human-centered approach and put yourself in that place and say, how can I get the feedback from this person? Or if I was actually in the situation that they encounter, what's the best way to solve it?
Yeah, I mean, that's great advice. And I think that's spot on. And, one of the things that a little bit unique about us, even though that we're not part of the church, Catholic Church, but we have access to other Catholic-based organizations. So one of the things that we were able to do is form a Catholic Racial Justice Coalition. Right. This is um, um, it's an organization that we sort of started in Catholic Charities and invited many different institutions to be part of our work, including St. Thomas, St. Mary University, and a whole bunch of other Catholic related institutions. And so, the purpose was really it's about talking about sort of racial justice and how do we then collectively own that space as organizations that are engaged in Catholic space and opportunity for Catholic based organization to really work collaboratively together and build upon relationships, the work they have started or work they're about to start. How do we build that on top of the work that we have started? So we were able to form this, getting at the issues of racism and discrimination around our community. As you know, church has a long history, not a very positive one, in issues of race and racism, and also involving issues of indigenous community, right? So it gives us an opportunity to really take on space. And because of our DNA, and our DNA in Catholic Charity is all about social justice, we have basis to really invite other community folks to be part of the coalition. So we're able to sort of create that space and move forward collectively because, nothing like having a broader collective benefit and collectively working together to really heavily focus on issues of injustice had that has occurred in our community and what can we do collectively to work on racial justice. So we have a leveraging point between all the major Catholic universities and Catholic organizations to get together or talk about this space. So we're sort of leveraging this platform a little bit further because it gives us that latitude as a nonprofit separate from the church. We have that sort of space that we can occupy. So we're leveraging that space as an organization.
That's great. And yeah, great advice from you both. And I think that our section at MDH and I hope MDH as a whole is also trying to use some of these strategies too of really humanizing these very difficult topics that we are trying to prevent, but also using that coalition model. And here we are in a coalition here where we're trying to do similar work. So um, thank you so much. This has really been so enlightening. And each time we have one of these sessions, I think, oh, it can't get better. And it just does. This has been such an incredible conversation and brought up so many ideas um, and things that we can all do, and has introduced us to some amazing work that's going on in our state. So thank you so much for sharing. You're invited to. Oh, you know what? We can open it up for questions. If anyone in the attendee pool has some questions, you can feel free to put them in the chat and I can read them, or feel free to come off mute. I know Annika has asked a specific question to Mark about some of our hiring practices and Connect 700 and how that may be a way to connect with Emerge and have some special highlights on various candidates.
Well, while we're waiting for others to come in, the Connect 700 system in state government focuses on disability, which probably has some intersection with Emerge, but not. It wouldn't necessarily. I mean, I can come out of jail or prison with a disability, and so but the Connect 700 really focuses on how do I help giving someone a fair, great chance to do the work. And the way the meaning of the numbers is the 700, I have 700 hours, so about a third of a year to that before probation would start, before, like, because in the state government, at least, every job has like a 6 or 9 month or a year probation period where I'm demonstrating that I can do the work. And so the C700 is a Connect 700 that says I've got 700 hours where I, as a supervisor, can work with a staff member coming in, provide the support of employment, give them a great chance before I even say, okay, yeah, now we can start the regular. And I don't have to use 700 hours. After 100 hours, I can say, oh, this person absolutely can do it. But I think so there's probably an intersection of some kind with Emerge, but I think they're probably a little bit different in that regard. I absolutely want to, I mean, where the goals are similar is we want to break what has been the pattern of disability in preventing fair, gainful employment, right? And so we don't want that to be a reason that someone is not offered a job. I mean, too often in the years that I've been in the state government, and when I was at different stages in my transit, when I couldn't ride a bike to work, I would take the bus or the train, and I usually go to the back of the bus and I listen and then engage in conversations. And I lost track of the number of conversations I had with folks who were just coming out of jail or prison, and I give my business card, and we'd connect and we'd talk, and I try to work at navigating how do we get them on the list, so I can interview them, or connect them with other places in state government that I knew wanted to hire. So maybe that's why we have the HR system now, because people like Mark were pushing the edges. I don't know. So.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I think, Annika, with you bringing up Connect 700, it seems like at least there's a model for this idea of really specifically focusing on groups that have encountered particular challenges to employment. And so I think that there is this, at least there's a precedent for looking at ways to connect with different groups. So I think that's a great thought. If there are more questions that come up, please put them in the chat. I'm going to shift us to talking with the attendees, and I invite you all to participate. Tara and Michael, if you'd like to stay, you are more than welcome to join us in our conversation. But really, I want to open it up to talk about how we can all work towards economic justice and use some of the lessons that we've learned, the examples that we've heard about in our own workspace. And I know that we're not the ones that make all of the decisions, but how can we start to really use some of these lessons learned? And what are some of the gaps, maybe, that exist that prevent us from addressing economic justice, but also what are some of the assets that exist in Minnesota? And we have two assets right here on our call. We have great partners that we could work with. So what do we think are some of those gaps and assets to addressing economic justice in Minnesota?
So I'm just going to drop off to allow you guys to have your own
Yes.
conversation. Okay.
Thank you so much, Michael, for everything. And you too,
Absolutely.
Tara. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for asking me to join.
Yes. Thank you.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye. So we're down to our own little IVPS group here too, so we can have a really focused conversation for 8 minutes about how we can address this. I thought they were amazing, and I'm so happy that we met them.
And our honorary IVPS member, Aaron Peterson.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. They were fantastic.
Wow.
Holy cow. That was great information.
Yeah.
I don't think I thought, I mean, going back to one of those earlier points, the difference between the pipelines of shelter and housing. I don't think I'd made that that distinction or that clarification,
Hmm.
and I'm still wrestling with, I mean, it makes the way Michael presented it makes a ton of sense.
Right. And I loved the way that he shifted and saying that they're shifting their thinking to prevention, to
Yeah,
really trying to get
yeah.
at these systems before folks become unhoused. So I think that that's great.
An analogy, I don't, Thomas, see if I'm on track here. The analogy is like a shelter is kind of like a harm reduction um strategy and
Hmm.
overdose, right?
Hmm.
Whereas the prevention, the housing is that upstream. It's that primary prevention component.
Yeah. I would love to talk with him more about what they are, what systems they have in place to do that prevention work. How do they? He said they're in touch with community groups and different folks, but I wonder where they insert themselves to try to get to the folks who are about to lose housing, because it seems to me that that would be also a spot for, I know I say them a lot, but community health workers, who could go in and, because these people who are about to lose their house probably have many other challenges that they're facing. And so how could we then also help with this linkage to care? Um, and I thought it was also really interesting that he also highlighted the fact that there is not that coordinating group that can really, a hub, as we've started to talk about them, that these hubs don't exist where people can come and get what they need, all of the different spindles that they may need to have addressed. Um, and where we come in is I hear this, the folks who participated in the injury and violence prevention during COVID study that we did, where different organizations were just saying, stop making us compete for funding and encourage us to work together. And so it's that idea of maybe encouraging organizations to come together to say, we're stronger together, we all have different strengths. What kind of coalition can you create that will address this multitude of challenges that need to be addressed in order to make the whole person healthier?
I was just going to say, overall, I thought it was a fantastic presentation, and I'm just taking the time to really mull it over. So if I'm being quiet, that's why.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there was so much to think about and the way that it affects all of our work. And I'm thinking to also this, call out for a discussion about incarceration and youth justice. And it's really got me thinking about economic justice is for that person, but the ripple effect that economic justice has, the mom that can get a good paying job where she's working 9 to 5 so that she can be at home with her children for dinner time, where, so many aces can be prevented in that situation by helping that one person. So it's not, economic justice is not an individual factor. It has immense ripple effects. Um, yeah, there was a lot in this that has given me a lot to think about. It's 11:20. Oh, hi, Marissa.
Hi, I just was gonna shout with what Thomas said. I agree. It was a great that are speakers, and wow, so amazing. I haven't met either of them before. So I was very excited to hear what they had to share, and it has me thinking, and it's definitely needs space to process. But I did want to mention on February 21st, we have our IVPS Community of Practice that Julie is organizing with Amanda, and the topic is going to be economic justice, which is good timing. So if anyone here wants to come to that and continue the conversation and thinking, that could be a good space to like have that space and time to think over the next few weeks, and then and bring what you're thinking and hear what others are thinking too. So just wanted to mention that. And if anyone's not sure what I'm talking about, let me know and I can send it to you.
Yeah, that's great, Marissa, and good reminder. And I'll make sure that we send Julia the recording of this if she wants to hear what, what's already been said here. So that's great. Haley, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, I just had a question, Catherine. In the state plan that you mentioned, and I apologize, I don't think I've read it, but does it talk about ways that we can incorporate economic justice? I just, like, for me, this one seems a lot harder to wrap my mind around than those other kind of areas that you mentioned, just like, trying to think about like what our team's role is in economic justice, or like how I can incorporate that in my own work. This particular area seems a lot harder for me to sort of conceptualize. So I was just curious if that's like fleshed out in the statewide plan at all.
Yeah, great question. And it is fleshed out a little bit more. It still has some open space for us to figure out how we can really address this. But yeah, and I'll be sure to send you a link to the state plan. And you can see what we've identified as ways that we can all address economic justice or keep it in the top of our mind. But yeah, I think this is a harder one for folks to wrap their head around. And so I hope people will listen to the recording, because I thought this was a really powerful conversation. So thank you to everyone who's here and who listened. And now we can take this and bring it into our respective spaces and bring these conversations up. It's 11:29, so really I do thank you for coming. And our next one will be on built environment next month. And yeah, if we want to continue these conversations, feel free to reach out.
Thank you.
Great, thanks everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.